Welcome to this explainer. Imagine doing everything society told you to do, right? Get the degree, work hard, save your money. But somehow you're pedaling as fast as you possibly can, and you are still falling behind. Today, we're diving straight into the data to uncover the really stark economic reality facing Gen Z and millennials. We're going to unpack the actual numbers to see exactly why the American dream feels so impossibly far away for so many people. Let's just start with a really stark juxtaposition here. Picture a guy named Dave back in the 1980s. He finishes college, lands a decent job, and boom, buys his first home within 3 years. He has no family money, no side hustle, just a regular standard paycheck. Now, fast forward to today, and let's look at Dave's son. He is the exact same age, possesses the exact same work ethic, and honestly, he actually has a better education. Yet he literally cannot even afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment in the exact same city where his dad bought an entire house. It's the same country, the same dream, but a completely different reality. And this brings up a pretty crucial question. Was Dave's son just lazy? Did this younger generation simply spend way too much on overpriced coffee and avocado toast? Or did something massive fundamentally shift underneath their feet, something that nobody really bothered to warn them about? Well, that is exactly what we're going to figure out. And by the end of this, you'll see why the data firmly points to a systemic shift rather than some kind of personal failure.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, income versus the wealth gap, the illusion of progress.
So here's the thing that really confuses most people when this topic comes up. Incomes have actually gone up on paper. Technically speaking, millennials and Gen Z earn more than their parents did at the same age, even after you adjust for inflation. So shouldn't things be getting better? Well, you have to remember that income is simply the money coming in, your salary, your paycheck. But wealth is what's left over after everything else is paid. It's what you own minus what you owe. Wealth is the actual number that tells you how well you're doing financially. And when you look at wealth instead of income, the picture gets pretty dark pretty fast. Get this. Millennials today hold about 41% less wealth than adults the exact same age did back in 1989. 41%. That is not a minor gap. That is nearly half a generation's worth of financial progress just completely wiped out. Economists actually measure this struggle using something called the Cost of Thriving Index. Basically, it tracks how much it costs to live a decent, stable life for a typical family of 4. It looks at the real, on-the-ground cost of modern basics: housing, healthcare, transportation, food, and modern necessities like high-speed internet and childcare. Let's look at the math on this because it's wild. Back in 1985, a typical male worker needed about 30 weeks of pay to cover basic annual expenses for that family of 4. By 2018, that exact same family needed 53 weeks of pay to cover those exact same basic costs. There's just one minor problem with that. There are only 52 weeks in a year. So before we even start talking about saving, investing, or building for the future, the math is just fundamentally broken. Which leads us perfectly into section 2, the broken housing math, a market out of reach. Let's just forget about mortgage rates and down payments for a quick second and ask one simple question. How many years of your salary does it take to buy the median home outright? This is called the home-to-income ratio. When the average baby boomer was 33 years old back in 1988, that ratio was 4.0, so 4 years of work to buy a house. During the 2006 to 2008 housing bubble, the one that literally crashed the global economy, that ratio hit 7.0, and everybody agreed it was a full-blown crisis. Now look at 2022. We are sitting at a ratio of 6.1 and rising, creeping dangerously close to those peak 2008 bubble levels. Except this time around, nobody declared an emergency. To put this into a bit more perspective, if a home cost $100,000 in 1990, general inflation, the cost of groceries, gas, everyday stuff, would price that home at about $231,000 today. But actual home prices didn't just track with inflation. They sprinted right past it. That exact same home actually costs roughly $377,000 today. Between a growing population increasing demand and younger generations putting off marriage while carrying heavy debt, the Home Affordability Index recently dropped below 100. And what that means is, if you earn an average income, you can literally no longer afford an average home. Moving on to section 3, the college degree premium, a widening canyon. The contrast in these numbers is just absolutely stark. In 1978, the minimum wage was $2.65 an hour, and in-state tuition was $688 a year. Those things were actually in balance. A student could work a minimum wage summer job and reasonably cover their education. Today, the federal minimum wage is $7.25, but that same tuition is over $9,200 a year. If tuition had just risen at the same rate as wages, it would cost about $1,400 today. Instead, it's nearly 7 times that amount. And because the sheer number of graduates has increased by 250% since 1970, supply has entirely outpaced demand. So the degree costs way more, but out there in the job market, it's actually worth less as a differentiator. Because wages haven't kept up with these soaring costs of thriving, younger generations are stepping into adulthood carrying an unprecedented trifecta of debt. Student loans have crossed $1.7 trillion, with the average grad owing $30,000. But the immediate crushing burden, that's credit cards. The average American carries close to $6,000, and a lot of times that's just to cover groceries and utilities, when gig work or entry-level salaries fall short. Add to that auto loans, averaging a staggering $716 a month at 8 to 13% interest. This is a massive financial anchor weighing them down, and it's all on depreciating assets.
Let's look at Section 4, Structural Generational Advantages, the importance of timing. You know how Malcolm Gladwell points out in his book Outliers that Bill Gates didn't just become Bill Gates because he was a genius? Generational success is heavily influenced by timing and the environment you happen to be born into. Gates was brilliant, for sure, but he also came of age at the exact perfect moment to capitalize on the personal computer revolution. Well, that exact same logic applies at a massive generational level. Baby boomers benefited from some really incredible macroeconomic tailwinds. They were born into this massive post-World War II economic boom where manufacturing was soaring and jobs were everywhere. They were also a massive voting bloc, meaning they had the sheer numbers to push for policies that directly benefited them. Things like affordable education and strong safety nets when they were young, and then lower taxes and strong retirement benefits as they aged. Plus, back when only 25% of people had a college degree, holding one came with a massive premium. Today, 40% have one, and like we saw, that payoff has really fallen. Now, you'll hear some people say, oh, don't worry, the boomers will pass down their wealth and millennials will be the richest generation ever. But the data clearly shows that this inheritance fix is largely a total myth. Yes, boomers do hold close to half of the U.S.'s $140 trillion in wealth, but inheritance doesn't fix inequality across a generation. It actually deepens it. The wealthy simply pass money down to the wealthy. If you grew up without generational wealth, there is no magical financial cushion coming to save you from these expensive systems.
So what do? Section 5, Playing by New Rules, Navigating a Broken System.
Look, knowing the system is stocked against you doesn't exactly pay the rent. So it's time to pivot and look at the actionable rules for navigating this totally new reality. Step 1, ruthlessly manage your margins. You've got to try and keep housing costs below 30% of your gross income. And if you can't do that, every single other expense has to get a lot leaner. Step 2, cars are quietly destroying financial lives. Keep those costs under 10% of your monthly gross, even if that means driving a beater for a while. Step 3, invest early. Putting just $250 a month into a Roth IRA over 40 years yields nearly $900,000 completely tax-free. And step 4, corporate loyalty really doesn't pay anymore. Job switching regularly can yield 10 to 30% salary bumps that you just won't get from standard raises. The main takeaway from this explainer is that you've got to stop blaming yourself for what is ultimately a systemic shift. The old script of go to college, work hard, save, and retire comfortably was written for an entirely different economy that just doesn't exist anymore. Millennials and Gen Z are not broke because they are weak or lazy. They are literally starting with more debt at the starting line and way fewer structural advantages. But once you see the system accurately for what it is, financial literacy becomes your absolute strongest defense. You just have to adapt to the current rules of the game. I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to reflect on today. Based on all the pretty stark data we've just explored together, from the soaring housing ratios to the frankly brutal cost of thriving, do you think younger generations truly have it harder in a measurable systemic way? Or is this financial friction just the universal feeling of growing up? Take a hard look at your own margins, try to apply these new rules, and thanks so much for joining me to unpack the real numbers behind the American dream.